2025 has brought a harsh reality check for U.S. travelers. Americans are no longer welcome in places they once visited freely, not just denied entry, but deported after arrival. Political tension, diplomatic rifts, and new global policies are reshaping who gets to stay and who's forced to leave. These aren't isolated incidents. They're a growing trend with serious consequences. Buckle up, because Canada's turning the tables on its southern neighbor, cracking down hard on Americans crossing its borders. While Canada has long been viewed as America's friendly northern neighbor, sharing a cultural affinity and a 5,500-mile border, 2025 has marked a dramatic shift in this relationship, with deportations of U.S. citizens surging to unprecedented levels. The root of this crackdown lies in a toxic blend of political, economic, and technological factors that have transformed Canada's once welcoming stance into one of stringent enforcement. Politically, the U.S.-Canada relationship has been strained by a series of trade disputes that erupted in late 2024, particularly over timber exports from British Columbia and energy pipelines critical to Canada's economy. The U.S. imposed steep tariffs on Canadian lumber, citing unfair subsidies, while Canada retaliated with restrictions on American energy firms operating in Alberta's oil sands. This tit-for-tat escalation has soured diplomatic ties, with Canadian officials accusing the U.S. of economic bullying. As a result, Canada's immigration policies have become a tool for asserting sovereignty, with American travelers bearing the brunt. Economically, Canada is grappling with its own challenges, including a post-COVID recovery that has left its labor market strained. The rise of remote work has exacerbated tensions, as Canadian authorities have identified a growing number of Americans exploiting lax tourist visa policies to live in cities like Vancouver and Toronto while working remotely for US-based companies. This influx has driven up rents in places like Montreal and Halifax, fueling local resentment. Geographically, the shared border, the longest undefended frontier in the world, has historically made it easy for Americans to slip into Canada, often under the radar. However, Canada's investment in AI-driven border surveillance, including facial recognition and license plate tracking, has revolutionized enforcement. In 2025, these systems flagged thousands of Americans for visa violations, with airports in Toronto and Vancouver becoming hotspots for detentions. Historically, Canada has been a haven for Americans during turbulent times, such as the Vietnam War era, when draft dodgers were welcomed with open arms. Today, however, economic nationalism and a desire to prioritize local labor have flipped the script, transforming Canada into a fortress against American overstays. Hold on tight, because Mexico's slamming the door on Americans in a shocking 2025 crackdown. Mexico has long served as a sun-soaked haven for U.S. retirees, digital nomads, and tourists drawn by its affordable cost of living, vibrant culture, and proximity to the United States. Cities like San Miguel de Allende and beach towns like Tulum have been magnets for Americans seeking a slower pace or a cheaper lifestyle. However, 2025 has seen Mexico's immigration policies take a sharp turn, driven by a confluence of economic pressures, cultural tensions, and political shifts. Economically, Mexico is grappling with rampant inflation, which has squeezed local budgets and driven up the cost of essentials like food and housing. In tourist-heavy regions, the influx of American expats has been blamed for gentrification, with skyrocketing rents pricing out locals in places like Mexico City, Puerto Vallarta, and Baja California. In January 2025, a high-profile crackdown in Baja California Sur saw dozens of Americans deported after protests erupted in La Paz, where locals demanded action against foreign-driven rent hikes. The protests, which drew thousands, highlighted the growing divide between American expats and Mexican residents, with signs reading, "Gringos Go Home," capturing the public's frustration. Politically, Mexico's 2024 election of a nationalist-leaning president has fueled a broader push to protect Mexican jobs and resources. The The new administration has framed American expats as economic interlopers, accusing them of exploiting Mexico's hospitality while contributing little to the local economy. This rhetoric has translated into stricter immigration enforcement, with authorities targeting Americans who overstay their 180-day tourist visas or engage in unauthorized work, such as running online businesses or freelancing for U.S. clients. Historically, Mexico's economy has leaned heavily on U.S. tourism dollars, with Americans accounting for nearly 70% of foreign visitors in some years. The cultural disconnect, combined with Mexico's economic woes, has turned a once welcoming destination into a minefield for American travelers. Get ready, because Thailand's flipping the script, sending Americans packing in droves this 2025. Thailand has long captivated American imaginations with its turquoise beaches, ancient temples, and low cost of living, but is now turning away U.S. citizens in droves in 2025. For decades, Thailand has been a haven for American backpackers, retirees, and digital nomads, particularly in hubs like Chiang Mai, Phuket, and Bangkok. However, a combination of tightened visa policies, cultural backlash, and economic reorientation has made Thailand increasingly hostile to American overstays. The Thai government, under pressure to regulate its booming tourism sector, has cracked down on foreigners engaging in illegal work, such as teaching English without permits or running online businesses on tourist faces. In April 2025, a viral incident involving an American vlogger who filmed himself disrespecting a Buddhist temple in Chiang Mai ignited nationwide outrage, with Thai netizens calling for stricter immigration controls. The vlogger, who had been living in Thailand for 3 years on a series of visa runs, was deported within days, and his case became a rallying cry for reform. Historically, Thailand's lax visa policies allowed Americans to stay for years by making quick visa runs to neighboring countries like Laos or Cambodia to reset their stays. This loophole, however, has been closed by a new digital tracking system that monitors entry and exit patterns, flagging repeat visitors for scrutiny. In 2025, thousands of Americans have been detained at airports and land borders, with Chiang Mai's immigration office reporting a 300% increase in deportations compared to 2023. Economically, politically, the Thai government is balancing domestic pressures to protect cultural heritage with the need to maintain tourism revenue. And Americans, seen as less deferential than other nationalities, are bearing the brunt of this crackdown. The days of Thailand as an easy escape for Americans are fading, replaced by a new era of vigilance and enforcement. Brace yourself, because Portugal's pulling the rug out from under American expats in 2025. Portugal's Golden Visa program, which offered residency in exchange for real estate investment, and its affordable lifestyle, have made cities like Lisbon and coastal regions like the Algarve magnets for Americans seeking a European foothold. However, a housing crisis, fueled in part by foreign buyers, has sparked a backlash that is reshaping Portugal's immigration landscape. In February 2025, the Portuguese government announced a sweeping visa overhaul, retroactively reviewing residency applications and raising financial thresholds for renewals. This followed massive protests in Porto, where locals marched through the streets, chanting slogans like "Homes for Portuguese, not foreigners," to demand curbs on foreign real estate investment. The protests were triggered by a 40% spike in housing costs over 3 years, with American buyers, often paying cash for historic properties, blamed for pricing out young Portuguese families. Economically, Portugal's post-2008 recovery relied heavily on foreign capital, with the Golden Visa program injecting billions into the economy. But in 2025, with a stronger euro and a growing middle class, the government is prioritizing domestic needs over foreign investment. Politically, a left-leaning coalition in Lisbon has capitalized on public anger, passing anti-gentrification laws that limit short-term rentals and impose higher taxes on non-resident property owners. But 2025's focus on local empowerment has turned Americans into symbols of an overheated market, making deportation a tool to restore balance. Heads up, because Australia is sending Americans back across the Pacific with no mercy in 2025. Known for its rugged landscapes, vibrant cities, and cultural similarities with the U.S., Australia has long attracted American backpackers, students, and professionals. However, a combination of economic recovery, rising nationalism, and technological advancements has made Australia a deportation hotspot for U.S. citizens. Economically, Australia's post-COVID labor shortage, which once relied on foreign workers in sectors like hospitality and agriculture, has largely resolved by 2025, with local unemployment dropping to historic lows. This has shifted priorities toward protecting Australian jobs, particularly in urban centers like Sydney and Melbourne, where Americans have been caught working illegally on tourist visas. A high-profile case in June 2025 saw a group of Americans deported after authorities raided a Bondi Beach cafe, where they were found serving coffee and bartending without work permits. The incident, widely covered by Australian media, fueled public calls for tougher enforcement. Politically, Canberra's 2025 budget cuts to visa processing have created a backlog, leaving many Americans in limbo and vulnerable to deportation. The government's Australia First rhetoric, amplified by a conservative-leaning parliament, has framed foreign workers as threats to economic stability, even though Americans represent a small fraction of visa violators. Historically, the U.S.-Australia alliance, cemented by military and trade agreements, fostered lenient policies for Americans. But 2025's focus on domestic priorities has eroded this goodwill. Culturally, Americans often integrate seamlessly into Australia's outdoor, laid-back lifestyle, but their presence in competitive job markets has sparked resentment, particularly among young Australians struggling with housing costs. Australia's allure remains strong, but the dream of an extended stay is increasingly out of reach, replaced by the reality of swift and uncompromising deportation. Listen up, because Japan's tightening the screws on Americans in a 2025 deportation wave. Japan's blend of ancient tradition and cutting-edge technology has long fascinated U.S. tourists, students, and professionals, particularly in cities like Tokyo and Osaka. However, a combination of cultural conservatism, economic self-reliance, and advanced surveillance has made Japan a deportation hotspot. Economically, Japan's aging population has strained its workforce, but the government is prioritizing skilled migrants from Asia over Western expats, who are seen as less committed to long-term integration. Americans, often in Japan on tourist or teaching visas, are being deported for minor infractions, such as working side gigs or posting content deemed offensive. In August 2025, a high-profile case in Tokyo saw an American English teacher deported after uploading YouTube videos mocking Japanese etiquette, which authorities labeled disrespectful to national culture. The case, widely covered by Japanese media, sparked a broader crackdown on foreign residents, with immigration officers conducting spot checks at language schools and co-working spaces. Historically, Japan's insularity limited foreign stays, but the 2020 Olympics briefly loosened restrictions to project a global image. That era has ended, with 2025 marking a return to strict enforcement. The allure of Japan's unique culture remains strong for Americans, but the reality of swift deportation has turned the country into a high-risk destination. Pay attention, because South Africa's cracking the whip on Americans in a surprising 2025 twist. South Africa's stunning landscapes, from the vineyards of Stellenbosch to the savannas of Kruger National Park, combined with its growing tech scene, have attracted U.S. entrepreneurs, retirees, and adventurers. However, political instability, economic woes, and cultural disconnects are driving a deportation surge. Politically, South Africa's government is under fire for failing to address unemployment, which hit 33% in 2025, among the highest in the world. To appease critics, authorities have targeted foreigners, including Americans, for overstaying visas or working without permits. In September 2025, a sweep in Cape Town's tech district deported several U.S. digital nomads after locals complained about rising rents in trendy neighborhoods like Woodstock. The operation, dubbed Project Jobs, involved immigration task forces raiding co-working spaces and cross-checking visa statuses with employment records. Economically, South Africa's push to develop its tech and tourism sectors has created a demand for local talent, putting Americans, who often dominate freelance roles in marketing and software, at odds with government priorities. South Africa's allure remains strong, but 2025's deportation surge has turned it into a risky destination for Americans. Gear up, because New Zealand's showing Americans the exit in a 2025 crackdown. New Zealand's pristine fjords, lush rainforests, and laid-back cities like Auckland and Wellington have long drawn U.S. expats, particularly those seeking an escape from America's political and economic turbulence. However, a housing crisis, rising nationalism, and strict enforcement are reshaping the landscape. Economically, New Zealand's housing market has reached a breaking point, with median home prices in Auckland surpassing $1 million. American expats, often wealthy retirees or remote workers, have been blamed for exacerbating the shortage by snapping up properties for vacation homes or rentals. In October 2025, a group of U.S. hikers was deported after authorities discovered they had been living off-grid in the South Island on expired tourist visas, using solar-powered vans to evade detection. The case, dubbed the Van Nomads, dominated New Zealand headlines, with locals accusing Americans of exploiting the country's natural beauty while contributing to its housing woes. Politically, a conservative-leaning government elected in 2024 has embraced Kiwi's first policies, slashing visa approvals and prioritizing local employment. New Zealand's isolation as an island nation simplifies enforcement, with only a handful of international airports and ports serving as entry points. In 2025, New Zealand's biometric screening systems, including fingerprint and facial recognition, have made it nearly impossible for visa violators to hide. Historically, New Zealand's small population welcomed skilled migrants to fill labor gaps, but the post-COVID focus on self-sufficiency has shifted priorities. A notable case in Christchurch saw an American tech worker deported after locals reported him for working remotely for a U.S. firm, violating his tourist visa. New Zealand's allure as a peaceful escape remains strong, but the reality of deportation has turned it into a high-stakes destination for Americans. If you found this video eye-opening, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more breakdowns on global travel, visa bans, and what's really happening around the world. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.